Helen has worked in resource management for 13 years and been at WRAP for 11 years. She oversees the roadmap for the delivery of the UK Plastics Pact, a whole chain approach to tackling plastic waste. Her role spans the interface between industry, government and citizens, and key work streams including eliminating unnecessary and problematic plastics, recyclability and composting. Helen is a key spokesperson for WRAP on plastics and recycling. Helen, when are plastics good?
So plastics are a highly versatile material. They're very lightweight, they're malleable, we can bend them into all sorts of shapes and sizes, we can freeze them, we can put them in the oven. And so for that reason, we use them in so many parts of our lives. We use them as contact lenses, we sleep on them, we brush our teeth with them, they are in the fabric of our buildings. And of course, we come into contact with them a lot through packaging. And arguably, all of these things are a good use of plastic. But the problem comes when we use too much of them. We use them unnecessarily. And of course, when they enter the natural environment and cause devastation.
Later in this event programme, we will see a short TED talk on the potential of fungi and mycelium as an alternative to plastic packaging, which doesn't have a high carbon footprint. How far have we reached in the UK or globally in developing and adopting progressive alternatives such as this?
There's certainly more innovation that's needed, no doubt. I think the important things to remember is, first of all, when it comes to packaging, the packaging is normally there to serve a function, to protect the product, to preserve the product. The carbon impact of the product tends to be at least 10 times that of the packaging, so it can perform a good function. And when it comes to alternative materials, we need to remember that all materials have an environmental impact. So sometimes plastic could be the right choice depending on the functionality. Other materials will have different impacts. They might be heavier. They may not be recyclable. They may be recyclable. They may have different toxicity. So there's lots and lots of different things to consider.
And what innovative packaging products or approaches can we expect in the future for materials such as liquids?
Yeah, so I think in the future I would expect us to see more refill and reusable packaging. And actually, when it comes to liquids, the interesting thing about the liquids is, does it always have to be a liquid? And is there actually a more sustainable way of us using products? Because liquids tend to carry a lot of water. So might we see more concentrates, for example? So that could be something for the future.
What single legal move would make the biggest difference to reducing the use of plastics?
So I think, again, one thing that we have to remember is it's not necessarily plastics per se, and when we're thinking about single use, we should be thinking about all different materials and how we can move away from single use. There are a number of pieces of really important policy coming down the line, including something called Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR. And what that will do is it's going to start making packaging more expensive. If it's not recyclable, it will be far more expensive. But because it's all going to become more expensive, I think that we will start to see a reduction. And government now are going to have powers which enable them to incentivise reuse and refill, and also wider environmental impacts. But that's not enough just in its own right. So EPR is really, really vital. But other measures, such as, for example, as a plastic tax, which is going to be introduced next year. So all plastic packaging that does not contain 30% recycled content is going to be whacked with a £200 fine per tonne. So, and that's really important because it's about driving the circularity in the material. If there's no demand for that recycled product, it's quite easy to sometimes lose that focus that actually recycling is all about remanufacture.
And do we know where that tax is going to land? Who's going to be paying that additional tax?
So that tax will be on the doorstep of business who are placing the packaging on the market. So the brands that we all purchase.
And do we know how business is reacting to that? What's their take on sucking up that tax?
Well, I mean, I think from business, they've known this has been coming for some time. So when it comes to the tax, I think what's difficult for business is, for some packaging, it's relatively straightforward. So we've seen a lot of announcements on things like drinks bottles moving to 100% recycled content, for example. In other types of packaging, it's actually really difficult. So plastic bags and wrapping, that soft, flexible stuff, at the moment it's almost impossible to get recycled content back into that for food contact packaging. So the business producers are sort of reeling a little bit on that. But necessity is the mother of invention.
How can the role of labelling products improve to provide clearer communication on packaging that will ultimately help us to change when, what and how we recycle?
Yeah, so labelling is an important way for people to see whether or not something can and can't be recycled. We have this split-second decision when we're disposing of packaging, and labelling can really help. But there are lots of different types of labels on packaging at the moment, which is causing a lot of confusion. So sometimes people actually are mistaking a recycling label for something which has not even got to do with recycling at all. It might have something to do with EU regulations. So there's a number of things that have to change in order to make labelling effective. So we need to get rid of really the ones that are confusing people. We also need consistency in the materials that are collected from our homes and our businesses, because if you don't have consistency in the collections, then the label can't possibly give you a clear message. And the other thing that we need to do is make sure that all packaging is labelled. So at the moment, some companies are quite happy to label their packaging if it's recyclable, but they may not be so willing to do that if it's not recyclable. But as citizens, we need the information regardless.
If we take manufactured clothing, other than cotton or wool, as an example for improving labelling, how can individuals be made aware of the environmental differences between plastic fabrics such as polyester or viscose?
So, all of these sustainability decisions are, it's a real minefield for citizens to navigate. And I think the thing that it really boils down to, and it's a little bit like plastics, is that the environmental impact, the biggest environmental impact is in the amount of stuff that we buy and how long we use it. So the goods we consume, the clothes we wear, the food we eat is responsible for nearly half of all global emissions. So actually, when it comes to clothing, the best thing that we can do is buy less and love the things that we buy and wear them more.
If we consider how individuals at a grassroots level across the UK are already part of the solution for reducing plastic usage and waste, what measures or legislation are in place now or coming up regarding the development and manufacturing of plastics at an industrial level, for example, water bottles or other really key household items?
Sure. So government is coming down the line with regulations. And indeed, just today, a consultation has been launched on the ban of more single-use plastic items. But regulations can take a long time to come in, and we shouldn't have to wait for regulations. So businesses are taking action, for example, through the UK Plastics Pact, which is where the biggest companies placing the biggest amount of packaging on the market have come together under the direction of WRAP. And they're working towards eliminating unnecessary and problematic plastic packaging, working towards 100% of the packaging being reusable or recyclable. We really need to radically increase the amount that we're recycling, and importantly, making sure that we are closing the loop by increasing the amount of recycled content in packaging as well.
So you mentioned certain banned plastic items, and we know some of those that exist already, like plastic straws. What are the next items that are on the list that are being banned that we should prepare for?
So government are now consulting on banning single-use plastic cutlery, plates, cups and bowls, and also, slightly randomly, it's actually not random, balloon sticks, which turn up on within beach cleanup data. But, so it's really great that these initiatives are coming down the line. But under the UK Plastics Pact, we're actually pushing businesses to go even further. So we're not just saying polystyrene cups, we're saying all types of polystyrene packaging, because none of that gets recycled.
There is a growing uncomfortable sense that developing nations are not only the recipients of our plastic waste, but also the cleaners of that waste. How can we be sure that our plastic waste isn't being shipped overseas, especially to developing countries, and ultimately then seeping into the natural world? Sure.
So I think the first thing to say is the most important thing that we can do when we have plastics is to get them recycled. If you don't place them in the recycling, they will never get recycled. Governments now have recently, through the Environment Act, given themselves the ability to legislate against shipping plastic waste to non-OECD countries, and that is one part of a move that needs to happen. We're exporting at the moment around half the amount of plastic packaging that we produce. And we've actually got a really golden opportunity here to create a UK thriving industry, create jobs, and also making sure that we are have a full audit trail of the plastic waste.
We know that the UK plastic carrier bag tax came into force in 2015. None of us can escape that, but how effective has this been to date?
So the tax itself has been very successful in reducing the number of individual bags. So when it was first introduced with a 5p charge, it resulted in roughly a 90% reduction in single-use plastic bags. However, too many of us were still buying carrier bags, so actually around 20% of us still continuing to buy bags frequently or every time that we go food shopping. So the government expanded that. They extended the charge. They extended the number of shops that are needing to charge. And I do believe that that's going to help drive more away from those bags. But the problem is that there is substitution again here. So single-use carrier bags being replaced with single-use paper bags. But of course, they all have an environmental impact. And the thicker gauge plastic bags have got more plastic in them. So while we might have seen a reduction in the number of individual bags, we've not necessarily seen a reduction in plastic in its totality.
What is the number one action that we can take as citizens to make a difference? And what is the number one action that industry should be adopting to make a difference?
So there are many actions that are going to need to be taken, and there's no one product that's going to solve the problem. So it's about making changes across a wide range of areas. One of the areas that I feel quite passionate about at the moment is fresh fruit and vegetables, because we can think about how is it that we can take actions that have multiple benefits. So we waste a vast amount of food in this country. We're wasting about a third of the food that we buy. Every day we're throwing away about 4.4 million potatoes. It's startling. The reason why we're throwing away so many of them is largely because we're buying too many, and that's because they're sold to us pre-packaged in a big bag. Now, there's major opportunity here to save plastic as well as critically saving food waste by selling more loose produce. So we as citizens should be able to buy that. At the moment, unfortunately, actually, you would think that more people would buy loose fruit and vegetables if it's available to them, but we don't. That's not always the case. So we do need to take up these things, but we need supermarkets to actually offer them loose, widen the ranges that are sold to us loose, and make it appealing by making sure that there's a price comparison, for example.
So there is that really interesting trade-off between what the supermarkets and the retailers are able to provide and give us versus what customers say they want to do. So do you think the onus is on the supermarkets initially to provide that, or the customers to demand it?
Well, I think it really is something that goes hand in hand, but I do think the business needs to act fast and first. Because that also creates a level playing field amongst all of them. We've seen had anecdotes back from the supermarkets, for example, where they may have removed packaging from cabbage. You don't need to wrap cabbages in plastic, but they've done that and their sales have absolutely plummeted because people are not buying them. Now, clearly, if they carry on selling them unpackaged, and so does every other supermarket, then people will start to get used to it. You know, we've been ingrained. We walk into the supermarket and what we see is plastic, and so that's what we're used to. So we really need a retuning.
As WRAP continues to raise the profile of its action programme both nationally and globally, is recycling or eradicating the real answer?
Well, I think that's really a combination of both. So we need to use as little as possible, but as much as necessary. And of the stuff that we get, we absolutely have to make sure that that gets recycled.
Thank you, Helen, for joining us at TEDxBanbury.
Thank you.